We've got a treat tonight. We've got Ben Lundsten, who's I think special photography. Some really significant images are on display here, and I thought it would be interesting to let me tell you a little bit about Ben too. He's kind of an old friend, and he's an alumnus of Bethany, and now teaching in media arts. And he's full of surprises. He teaches videography, but I won't steal all the thunder. I think this shows us a very interesting side of him. And we also have Dr. Lars Johnson from the English department to interview and kind of guide us through Ben Lundsten's thought process. We'll leave a little time at the end for questions, and I think I should just get out of the way. Come on in, guys. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And hello, everybody. Yeah, it's really sort of awesome to see this packed house here, especially in light of the fact that we're going to be looking at and talking about and sort of reveling in what I consider to be some really, really beautiful photographs and works of art. Are we going to be passing this microphone back and forth, I guess?
I think that's the plan. I have short arms, so
Shall we?
Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Hey there.
There.
Hi.
Otherwise, hi.
Hi, Lars.
Hi, Ben.
How are you?
So good to see you. I'm
Yeah,
really good.
likewise. It's almost like I see you every day.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's almost like we're in a living room or something,
Yeah.
right? Great. Sitting in these nice chairs. Yeah, so I don't know if what I'm going to do here is an interview so much as participate in a conversation with Ben. I'm going to start off by saying, and this might sound a little hyperbolic, but it's not. I mean it genuinely. I had not ever looked at any of Ben's photographs before. I'd seen a couple of his films, especially the ones that he made when he was a student here. And I think I even narrated in one of them, right?
Yeah, we'll go unnamed.
Yeah. And
It's lost in the archives.
for which I'm thankful. But in anticipation of this evening, I came over here at the beginning of the week right after the show had been hung, to look at all of the photographs. And as I was walking around and working my way through the space, got progressively more and more blown away. And by the time I got upstairs and was looking at some of my very favorite out of the collection, I was astonished. I think there's some astonishing stuff going on here in a lot of different ways. And so maybe what I'll start with is to get you to talk a little bit about, just for lack of a better term, the ways in which either this series of all of these hangings, right, because there are groupings, or even just the individual photographs, the ways in which those are composed. Because the thing that struck me more than anything else on that first visit was what appeared to me to be a kind of amazing balance between something organic, something natural, right? Because so many of these, I think, are just moments that you captured where you snapped somebody who was doing something as a part of their everyday life, right? They weren't posing for a photograph. So that naturalness shows up, I think, in all of these. But at the same time, there is something that looks incredibly composed, or I hope this isn't too inflated a term, painterly, designed, right? One of my favorite photographs is the boy in the striped shirt, which is on the second floor. So, I mean, everybody should look at all of these before they leave, but that one in particular just blows me away. And so the subject matter seems pretty straightforward and simple, a boy walking across a courtyard, right? But there's a building in the background and a shadow, and so you see the shadow that goes across the top of the building, and then there is a triangle coming down. And the boy is at the very bottom of that triangle, that shadow, Oh, and it looks like he could have come down a dark escalator and arrived at the bottom of that shot, and you took it right at the moment that he arrived at the bottom of that escalator, that shadow. And then there's even a little tree right in front of him that, in a way, is a kind of mirror image of the boy. And everything just looks perfectly placed in that photograph, and yet it was just an unplanned, spontaneous happening. That blows my mind. So how did you do that?
Yeah. First of all, thank you, everybody, for being here. And thank you, Lars. This is what I was hoping for. Where to start? I'm really happy that you picked up on what you picked up on, because that's why I do what I do and why I love photography for what it is. I think a word you could have added maybe is like cinematic, which I think gets thrown around too much. But for me personally, my love for imagery comes from a childhood of growing up watching incredible movies. Casablanca, Indiana Jones, things that I won't mention because I was probably too young to watch them at the time. But I grew up watching a lot of, like, in hindsight, they were incredible films, and I think we had talked about this a little bit, but at a young age, the story doesn't necessarily latch on or have meaning quite as significant as the image does. And that always kind of stuck with me. In high school, I just gravitated to the camera because it was only about composition. Really, at the end of the day, that's all that mattered. And so, kind of unpacking the behind the scenes of some of this stuff is a decade of caring very deeply about the arrangement of elements within a frame, looking at a lot of really great compositions. So for you aspiring photographers, take pictures and look at pictures constantly. I have a small library of photo books. I spend time looking at things. I hope that the scale causes you to pause for a little bit and actually look at a picture instead of just swipe past them. Because a really interesting thing, this is the first time I've seen my work at this scale. So for me even, it's only ever lived on that screen. But it's an acute attention to a lot of different things. An analogy that I think works somewhat is, say, like an athlete who's really good at what they do, makes things look easy, right? You go watch an athlete or a musician like tonight, watch what they do, and the pianist makes it look like, it's just this thing that's happening, and I kind of want to play piano now because that looks fun. And you don't realize there's decades of practice behind it to make it look effortless. And so it's all of that preparation and time and effort that allows me to be on a street where there's thousands of people, and I'm focusing on that. For instance, the ladies crossing the road in Myanmar with the umbrella. I'm on a bridge with like 500 other people, and life's just passing by, and that's just glancing off to the side of the bridge and going, oh, that's happening. But it's putting myself in that state where I can react that way. Composition is, and what's sad now too is you can lose it. I'm not as sharp as I was. This is 4 years of photographing 2 weeks at a time for 12 hours a day. Do that at anything and you'll get good at it, I promise you. So I think that's a part of it too, is when I'm taking these trips, I'm photographing all day for the nonprofit organizations, which is like 8 to 9 hour days. And then as soon as I'm done, I go and I hit the streets and I start photographing again. So I'm putting in like 12 to 14 hours of photography a day for 2 weeks straight. And you just get on this other plane of existence where I'm kind of taking in everything all at once, but also able to focus. Again, I equate it to that athlete of, you take a football player, because in football they have like plays that they plan for, and you plan and plan and plan and practice and practice and practice. And then the amazing thing that happens is these spontaneous moments that they have to react to, and some incredible play happens and they didn't plan for it. And I'd say it's kind of the same. I practice so that when I'm in a new place with new sights and sounds and smells, and I have to like not get hit by a car, crossing the street in Myanmar is, I kid you not, like Frogger. There's two images that aren't here tonight that I love, and they're both taken at night in Myanmar, and one is a young boy. And the way you cross a road in Myanmar is you just go to the little dotted line and you wait, and cars pass on each side, and then you go to the next one and you wait, and you go to the next one and you wait. And so there's a photo of a young boy crossing the road, and there's a giant truck driving right past him, and it's like inches from him. And then there's another of a man, and him and I are like sitting in this middle line together. And I just look, and I brought my camera up, and I captured this intense, it's kind of similar to the stare he's giving me, but, so it's the presence of mind to say, I'm not going to get hit by a vehicle, and I can also make an image, right? So it's can be dangerous, but I think it's that practice, so that when you're in a place where there's a lot going on, you can focus and be prepared for a moment like the boy in the shadow, right? Like, that's something I see out of the corner of my eye, and I'm actually, a lot of times I think like in that photograph, what's really nice is I can remember these moments pretty clearly, and if you ask my wife, I have a pretty bad memory. So the photography actually allows me to remember. I took a trip to Italy, didn't photograph because I told myself, I want to be in the moment and enjoy Italy. I remember very little, other than my engagement and maybe one other thing. I remember the engagement, though. That's the point, is I remember it. But really, there's a lot of that trip that's lost to me that I just can't pull back like I can all of these moments. And so with that boy, I've made the picture in my head before I took the picture. I saw what was happening, and I turned. And then the photo is an afterthought, if that makes sense. So I've already made the image. I just have to, go through the work.
That's crazy. That's just crazy. And wildly impressive. So, so when you said you'd already made the image and the photograph is the afterthought, is that like isn't it sort of famously that Michelangelo said something about David being in the block of marble and he just had to get him out of there, right? Anyway, that just blows my mind. And I think about, I like the analogy to the athlete and the kind of moves that you have to make, right? And having an awareness, I suppose, of a pretty broad sort of playing field, if we're going to extend the metaphor, and then to anticipate stuff that is going to happen or that you think is going to happen, right? So that you can be ready to take the shot. So you talk about wandering around these cities and these 12-hour days of taking photographs, being in the flow, right? In addition to that, do you ever go out and scout locations? Sorry, and then I'll give it back to you. The reason I'm asking is another one of the photographs upstairs. I really like the second floor. Is the gesture under the bridge, and oh my gosh, that is a mind-blowing photograph, and that guy echoes those pillars all the way back on that bridge, right? And so I was wondering, did you see that bridge and think, I'm going to stay here until somebody shows up, or are you just wandering around? So are you scouting locations ever?
Yes and no. It's picture by picture. So the guy on the bridge, no. That's just and what's happening a lot of times is, again, the athlete. If you've played in a sport, you're not actually by the time you're in the game, you're not thinking about what you're doing. You shouldn't be, because you're already too late. It's too slow to react. It's too late to worry about whatever skill it is that you need to have in that moment. You either have it or you don't. And so I'm really not thinking, I'm reacting constantly. And sometimes I don't even know what I'm reacting to until, again, after I've taken the picture, which is kind of the opposite of the boy in the shadow. That I knew what I was reacting to and I saw it. Other times, guy under the bridge. Another one is the triangles up top. It wasn't until that photograph went black and white that I realized there were triangles on the floor as well. But I was reacting to something, and in the moment, if you had stopped me and said, "Why did you take that picture?" I'm like, I don't know. I thought I really don't sometimes. I'm reacting. But there are times when I do wait. So the photograph of the woman on the corner, that was like late night in Thailand. And that was one of those nights where I had the pleasure of being in one place for a while. And so I got familiar with the area, and I would walk the area. And sometimes, like in that corner, I thought of Nighthawks right away. The way the Edward Hopper painting has that corner street, and the interior is basically the only light in the whole scene. Obviously, there's light above, but something about it made me say, "Ooh, Nighthawks," and that alone made me just stop. And then I think I waited for maybe 5 to 8 minutes on the street corner just for different figures to come through, and it wasn't working, and then she came along. So that's a prime example of, I wait sometimes because the composition is so strong or the mood is so strong, and then you're just waiting for that element to come through that's going to complete the composition. So a really weird thing, I was saying this earlier today, is for most of these images, I don't see people as people when I'm photographing. They're just a part of a composition. It's their shape, it's their color, it's their gesture, and that's oftentimes what gets me to stop. Obviously not in the case of some of the portraits that you see. But yeah, it depends. Like the one of the pink umbrella and then shooting through the cherry blossom tree. That's like an instance of both, maybe, where I was walking down a street in Singapore, and again, was really excited because it was raining, but I had nothing. I spent like 45 minutes photographing nothing. And then I was walking down the street and I saw the tree, and then I kept walking, and then she walked past me. And again, it's like I'm not forcing these thoughts, but it just went, there it is. And I just turned around and I ran to catch up with her, and I had 2 seconds to peek my camera through the cherry blossom tree and get the photo, because something in my brain said pink tree, pink umbrella, rainy street, there it is. So that one's a little bit of both, right? Where I don't know, maybe not, but I'd say most of it is reacting and some of it is waiting for someone to come into the frame or for something to come into the frame. If that answers that question.
And your explanation of all of that, where you're talking about, in this instance, the Nighthawks instance, right? Waiting for somebody to show up before you can take the picture. Just thinking about all of these other photographs, and pretty obviously they're populated with human subjects, right? And the environments that they're in are as appealing to me as the human subjects. But as I was thinking about it a couple of days ago, it's the relationship between the two, I think, that is the most appealing to me. And in part because of that balance between the environment and the person who's moving in it somehow. And even the woman with the pink umbrella between the cherry blossoms. Right, everything just fits sort of wonderfully there, and there's this amazing balance. So anyway, that is appealing, but then I was also thinking that really your subject is human, right? That you're interested in human beings, because none of these environments are empty of human life. As you're taking photographs of people, what is it, if anything, that you're hoping to convey in those photographs about those human subjects? And maybe the way you answer that is different depending, because a couple of these are posed, right? There's this wonder. Oh, and is the monk upstairs? Did he not pose for that? Oh, okay.
I found him that
way. And he's probably, so now I can imagine him still that way right now. It's sort of eternally, but most of them, right, are not posed. So I'm just wondering if you ever have anything in mind about what it is that you're hoping to make visible about these human beings that you're taking pictures of.
Yeah. First, I think an important thing to address is that there are just people. I have tried landscape photography. I did product photography for a while, but I only really care about photographing people, and that took me a while to come to grips with, because I thought I should do more or be more or experiment more, and then I finally just gave in and said, it's clearly people. I've been in amazing spots. I have landscape photos of Thailand. I have landscape photos of Myanmar. I'm just not interested. I feel nothing. The landscape's amazing to be in, but photographically it has zero interest for me. However, I love landscape photography. I watch a landscape photographer on YouTube more than anyone else because I'm so interested in his process and how he interprets what he does. And I think that informs the way that I work. So it's not that I don't like landscape photography, it's that I don't feel the need to participate. And so I love people. I mean, that's why I teach. That's why if you know me, I am me. That's what I don't know. I've just always loved talking to people. I'm excited by people. I rarely am alone. I don't mind being, actually doing street photography is probably the most alone I've ever been in my life because I am alone when I do it. And that was the really interesting thing for me actually, was realizing that is it's about the only thing that I actively seek out to be alone in the pursuit of is when I'm out doing this. But I hope if anything, it's making mundane things, extra. It's making them more, and then maybe taking a step back and saying, where I work or where I live is actually kind of beautiful. Like I've been so busy the last 2 weeks that I just 2 days ago sat down in my office and looked up and realized the colors were there and I went, this is incredible, right? Like it's a picture outside my window that I work, and I think there's more beautiful moments around us maybe than we realize. And sometimes it takes that outside perspective to come in and say, hey, look, actually what you have is pretty great, and look at how beautiful this is, because it's just like a lady shopping for watermelons, right? But I love that one. Or the security guard sitting outside his workplace, that, the guy in the yellow with the yellow over here. So that's it. I love finding beauty in small moments. It's really the beauty that excites me too. Is I struggled for quite a while. I would say like 4 or 5 years as to whether or not photography was even like worth it for me. Instagram, Facebook, like just this onslaught of photos, and I was like, do I want to again participate in just making more? But then I heard an interview with Alex Soth, a Minnesotan photographer, and he said an amazing thing that I will never forget, and it just instantly relieved me. I went, oh, I'm good. Because he was struggling with a similar thing, and he said, he said, I've never heard anyone complain that there are too many flowers, right? And because they're beautiful, and they're just enjoyable to look at. So if I can make something beautiful and enjoyable to look at, that's worth contributing more photographs to. So that's really the ultimate hope, is that it's beautiful, and it's the beautiful moments with the human subjects. And then talking about the posing, it's really just, if you call it posing, the monk was just, and then I went with the camera, and then he just went, and then I leaned in, took the photo, and it was done. But the 3 ladies deserve a shout out. So I have their names written down somewhere, and I couldn't find it. I was looking. 3 sisters from Myanmar who were cooks at an orphanage that we were at, and they came there every day to cook, and they also own their own business, and they would do these massive weddings. If you've ever been to an Asian wedding, we're talking like thousands of people. So they have a side business where they cook for thousands of people at weddings, but they take time out of their day to come and cook for these kids, and they were the happiest, even though the one's pretty, she's the serious sister, right? They even feel like characters. But they're so happy and so joyful, and their food was phenomenal. It doesn't really fit with the rest of the show, but they deserved like heroic scale, was kind of how I felt. And so that kind of encapsulates the human aspect too, of like something you don't necessarily consider, cooks at an orphanage, and then you're confronted with them on a larger than life scale.
So I also love the fact that you want to find beauty in the ordinary, the everyday, right? One of the things I was thinking as I was looking at all of the people, including the 3 sisters, is that, okay, in some ways these are unremarkable people, right? Which sounds mean, but I don't mean it that way. They're just everyday people, right? There's nobody famous. There are no celebrities, nobody historically significant. I mean, just sort of everyday, regular folks. But even in the photographs, apart from the portrait of the 3 sisters, who are remarkable in that pose. And I like your description of them as heroic, and that somehow you wanted to convey in the size of the portrait and so on, their heroism. But I think even all of the others who are just going about their affairs they strike me as being remarkable. And I suppose there are a lot of reasons for that, but again, it seems to me that it has something to do, for me as a viewer, with their relationship with their environment. Another favorite of mine is on the end of the wall here, and it's the woman who's striding in front of those massive pillars, which just strikes me as this amazing shot because, right, I suppose you run the risk of her being overwhelmed by her environment, those huge pillars, right? But she is the center of that photograph, and she strikes me as a much more dominant presence and force in that scene than the pillars behind her. She complements them. Or I guess they complement her, not the other way around, right? She's the focus. That's amazing. Oh yeah. Well, okay, sure. I just listen. No, yeah. And sometimes I blather on, so I'll just ask Jenna. I'm gonna be quiet in just a second. Okay, so I have to do it quickly. I mentioned to you that we're reading a book in one of my classes, right? And it's about art and being a painter and stuff. Anyway, one of the characters in the book, who's a modernist painter, he tells his protege, this young boy, that if you want to be a painter, you cannot love your subject the way you seem to love your subject. Because if you do, you're going to wind up producing sentimental work, which struck me as a really sort of interesting idea. Although I don't know that I agree with it. Because when I'm looking at the people in these photographs, and based on what you were just saying about, right, you love people, you need to be around people, it seems to me that you love your subject matter, right? But I do not think these photographs are sentimental at all. So there.
I want to not forget to address the relationship between the subject and the environment, but on what you just said, I think it's kind of a dichotomy between I love people, so I photograph people, and I'm hoping that my genuine love and enjoyment of the individual in the moment is what allows me to take a lot of these. I'm small. I'm about the average height of a male in Thailand, so I don't stick out. I put my cameras up there for you photo students, so no one tonight asked me what camera I use. That's why those are there. But they're very unobtrusive. So it's my approach and hopefully my outward expression of joy and love that allows me to photograph them the way that I do. But back to, I don't oftentimes, unless I'm close, unless I'm like these two here, the man on the corner and the woman at the fruit stall, I don't really view them as people. I view them as objects within a frame. I view them as colors or shapes, at least in the instant. In the instant, I'm photographing them because they're people and I'm interested in the people and I love people. But in order for my image to work, they have to be more than that. And I'll feel it. I'll be unhappy. There's 15,000 images, which isn't really that much if you look at my hard drive. But first of all, thank you to Ingrid. I have a lot of thank yous I don't want to forget. But Ingrid Bladel was instrumental in getting me started because I thrive off collaboration, and I know for a fact there's things that I missed. So Ingrid went through like 15,000 images with me to start narrowing things down. I think, did we get it to like 400 or something? I don't remember. But somewhere around there. And so there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work constantly. And so if I cared too much about sentimentality or people in such a way that I wanted them to be beautiful or what, like I could just feel myself creating images that become cliche or boring. And so that doesn't interest me. It's how people complete the composition, which then becomes that relationship between subject and background. That's oftentimes, Thailand is different than, I really struggled in Sweden and when I was in Copenhagen because the environment is different. I should have been thinking in black and white, but I was thinking in color. And in Thailand, it's like a sin to photograph in color, I think, because it's so colorful. So once my brain got turned on to that, it was all about how the color relationship is working with the individuals, especially like over here, that one on the far left, the lady shopping, like looking in her bag, right? It's that orange that's mirrored throughout the whole image, and then that, I mean, orange and blue, right? It works incredibly well together. And so it was that recognition of color, but of the subject. I could have taken it without her, and those colors are still predominantly there, but it's the person that made it interesting. So I think it's very much about the person and their environment. But I think what makes, hopefully, them work is that the composition is king. Nothing is more important than how the elements are arranged within the frame. And then what is it that I'm drawing attention to? Is it a color? Is it a shape? Is it a line? Is it a gesture? So I think that's what maybe allows it to hopefully not feel contrived or, you know, I forget the word you used, but is that sentimental? Yeah. I think too for my students, right? This is like I'm a big preacher of story. Like story comes above everything else, and if you're trying to make a film or tell a story, like the story has to be king. And I don't care how much you like whatever idea you came up with or whatever thing you're thinking about. If the story doesn't work, you cut whatever is not helping the story. And so it's the same way here. Like there's so many people that walked the young girl at the White Temple in Thailand. There's probably like 4 or 5 other people that walked by, and I could have stopped at any moment, but their shape wasn't right. So I kept photographing, and then I found her, and I loved her haircut and her silhouette, and suddenly, and the stride too, like if her stride was different, or her left arm, the way that it swings out and is silhouetted, if that stuff wasn't there, I probably wouldn't like the image. So it has nothing to do with sentimentality, it has everything to do with how all those elements are playing together to create something I like. And it's personal. I just, you know, if you like it, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine. This is what I like. But then, too, having that taste have a foundation somewhere. I've studied, I've looked, I've watched, I've read. So I'm hoping that I'm building a foundation of taste based off of, you know, history and not just how I'm feeling in the moment.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're able to achieve a necessary distance then, right, between your subjects and what it is that you're hoping to accomplish or produce with the photographs, that these things become compositional or technical or aesthetic problems, right, to solve. I'm not, okay, so number one, I'm not sure I believe you entirely. Because again, I find the people in these photographs so compelling. And I mean, I don't know necessarily that things have to be cut off or divided in these stark ways, right? But it seems to me that it's probably impossible for somebody, an artist, regardless of the effort they go to achieve that distance, not to still have their work and their vision and their eye and those decisions they're making in the moment informed by, right, those things that they're most interested in. The people they love, the subject they love, their core values, whatever it happens to be. Does this sound familiar from this afternoon? Yeah. What's that? I know, but I thought I would have a conversation with you in addition to Ben. Oh, okay. But I'm also struck by what you said, and I understand the point that you were making, that the people that you're photographing aren't people when you're photographing them, right? They're elements of composition. Yeah. So I was talking to somebody before the show about a topic related to this, and so I'll ask you then. Talk a little bit about what, in your opinion, are the ethics of the artist, especially in relation to subjects, like these people who are being photographed, who don't know, who aren't planning to be photographed, right? And who you're not imagining as people, but as elements in an aesthetically pleasing piece of art. Yeah.
No, this is good. So now I'm just thinking. To be honest, this has been almost 3 or 4 years since I've participated in this. So I'm eager to get back out and trying to put myself back in these moments. And I think, I don't want to sound so cold, I love people. It's this moment that happens where I'm on the street and I'm watching and I'm smiling. I'm buying fruit from people, but like as soon as that comes up and I click, there's just like this quick switch and then it's gone. There's numerous times that I photograph someone and they notice and then I just smile and then they smile and then we continue on with our lives. A couple of times people have wanted me to show them and I show them and then it gets even better and they're so happy. Only twice have I been confronted in a more aggressive way. One was a Thai security guard and I just went, that's fine, delete, here you go, thanks. And then he walked away. Great photo. It was a great photo. And the other time was in Copenhagen. There was a German group, and they were all just like pointing at. It was a great photograph. They're all like pointing at something, and they're like talking, and there was all these weird gestures, and they're holding on to food, and so I took the photograph, and the guy noticed me, and he just came straight over to me like, "What do you think?" And I just like, "Sorry, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm a street like I take street photos," and I showed him like my roll, and he's like, "Oh, okay, that's kind of cool," you know. And that's really been it. Those two instances. But I forgot what the question was. Because it was good. I liked it. Ethics. Oh, the ethics. Well, you know, I guess there's like personal ethics and then there's what's written in law. And most countries in the world, if you're in a public space, your image is public. So you can photograph it and nothing can be done about it. There's some European countries that have cracked down on this. And there's actually quite a few street photographers. I think is Germany one of them that's getting stricter. Japan might have some strict laws too. I don't remember, but for the most part, if you're out in public, you're free to photograph. But for me, no, I knew this was going to come up, and I forgot his name. I know his name, but I don't like his work. So, does street photography gets way up in their face? Flash. Is it Bill Winter? He's old now. Anyways, there's a New York photographer. Is it Gary? Not Gary Winogrand. No. Is it Gary Winogrand? Hey, I did it, everybody. So Gary Winogrand is kind of the polar opposite of me. He photographs people, but he'll literally take his flash and he'll get right here, boom, on the street, and he just turns around, he's in your face. And so he's got these, they're really aggressive in-your-face photographs. Sorry, I got so close. But that to me is yuck. Like, I have zero interest in that. That's way too far. Yeah, and that's why a lot of this too, the people are fairly obstructed. You can't really see faces. I mean, sometimes you can, right? And they're just right there. But I think that can help sometimes with that. Honestly, I walk around with a stupid smile on my face because I'm so happy all day. Just like smiling. It's this short little bald dude with a small camera smiling at you. No one has really seemed to care yet. So it works out really, really well. I think it would be totally different if I was 6'5", giant DSLR, huge lens, walking around photographing the same exact way. I honestly believe that it would change my images. Things would be much more challenging, I think. So, yeah, I struggle with the ethics for a bit, but I mean, street photography has been around since the 1850s. It's a way of life. It's actually really important too. That street in Myanmar might not look like that right now. That building might be gone in 10 years. That building might be gone now. There's so many wonderful, Vivian Mayer, right? She's one of the most prolific photographers of the 50s, 60s in Chicago. And it's because of her that we have this amazing library of images that show us what life was like at that time. Yes, there are other Chicago street photographers, but no one as prolific as her. And so she's given us a document of history while also photographing people on the streets. And it's fascinating, it's phenomenal. So again, I just feel like a participant in this thing that's been going on for a long time.
I like the idea of participation, because initially I wasn't thinking about the subjects necessarily as individuals, right? I mean, my initial response to them was as incredibly interesting people to look at, right, and to see, and especially within their particular environments. And then, you know, there's also the whole appeal of, you know, a kind of voyeurism, getting through realistic photography, for instance, to look into, or to look into somebody's life, or to look at somebody, right, and to see something there that is intriguing for one reason or another. I suppose for me, it's always because there's something recognizable there, right? And sometimes these moments are pretty intimate. Right? I love the shot of the couple holding hands on the corner, and it's a pretty sort of generic and common moment, right? But the fact that they're in shadow, right? That they're close together. They seem kind of vulnerable in that moment, and they're having an intimate moment. That, as a result of your photograph, in a way, is no longer private. I don't know that the intimacy is gone, but yeah. So I don't know. It's just an interesting. It strikes me as an interesting issue for the artist to think about his or her subject matter and what kinds of obligations they have. Yeah.
There are definitely times I didn't photograph something, right? So I'll pass the, you know, there's people in not great situations. There's humiliating things. There's things that would be, I felt wrong. So there's a lot that I passed up that would be really easy to fall into the trap of, oh, this is a thing worth photographing. It's really not. And then, too, talking about, I think this is an interesting contrast, this work, to the other type of work that I love to do, which is documentary, and they're very closely linked. But documentary is more, I would put it more on the like end of emotion trumps composition. So if I'm going to tell a documentary story, so if you go to my website or you go to christiansforward.org, I did all their photographs. You can tell which ones I didn't do. But I did that work, and it's very different. It's mostly faces, and you're close, and you're a part of a scene, and it's hopefully telling a story, more than an implied story. There's an actual story. So it's very, very different than this work, and that's where the emotion is way more important to me than the composition. And so I think that's where I kind of fill that need for photographing that way, and I view this as a different type of work. So I think that's maybe how I'm separating those two. So I encourage you to look at the other stuff too, and maybe I'll have a show of that someday, but I also don't know if I feel comfortable putting that in the show because, again, it's that ethics side of things. Like those, I was there working for an organization, those kids are in certain, sociological aspects of life that they don't have any control of, and I'm there as a guest with the intention of telling that story, and if those photographs are removed from that story and put on the wall, it doesn't, I don't know, that wasn't never their intention. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's a great example of what we were talking about earlier, where you want to achieve a certain distance from your subject matter, right? And yet you're always still informed on some level by whatever your core values happen to be, your principles, your beliefs, and the very fact that you would ask yourself questions or be cognizant of the fact that, oh, this scene, right, as good a photograph as it would be, I could make really good art if I got that shot, but there's something going on there that for whatever reason isn't any of my business or would be inappropriate to photograph, right? And so there you're operating with a series of ethics, your core values. Yeah.
I don't think this photo's online anywhere either. It might be. But a prime example of this is I was in Indonesia, and I had been giving a lot of thought to this as we were flying over because it was my first time ever doing this, and so I was hired to go photograph different villages and the work the Kingdom Workers were doing. And we had been at this small school for 2 days, and after the first day, kids are getting used to me. We've taken some photos, and I've understood the routine of the day. And so by the second day, school is winding down, and they've got this beautiful little white school building, and it leads off into the jungle because they walk through a jungle to go to school. I'm like, that's crazy. That's so cool. And I remembered how they left the day before, right? They make this little train just like kids do here, and they're all laughing and talking. And I went, oh, I'm going to get that today. Again, I'm making the image ahead of time. I know the photograph that I want. So I step out and I come around school and I'm getting ready, and they're coming through and they're doing what I was anticipating. And then I'm getting ready to photograph, and they noticed me. And all the kids but one stopped, and he just kept walking by himself, and then he stopped, and he turned around, and he looked at them, and he looked at me, and his expression changed. And I think I took like 2 or 3 frames, and there's one frame, it's phenomenal. It's a great photograph, but it's just this boy on a path, jungle behind him, he's all alone, and he has this expression that you could put almost any emotion onto, whether it's, sadness or surprise, or, you insert emotion here and you could see it on his face. But it was so untruthful to the moment, and I am the one that infringed upon the moment. And so I never shared that with Kingdom Workers because I could already picture how it would be used. There was perfect negative space that you could have put whatever text you want, like, help these sad kids, and into, like, I could just picture it in the wrong hands of someone on a marketing team who's just trying to, like, get something out. And so I just told all the other kids to go over and crowd around him, and then we got a group shot of them laughing, and that's the one that I gave Kingdom Workers. It wasn't the moment that I anticipated, but the truthfulness of that they were happy, they were together, that was much better. So that was a huge learning moment for me.
Otherwise, so it's not exploitive, right? I mean, it could have been, right? If it, yeah. And just your awareness of the fact that it could have been, right? I also find really compelling your comment that what you want to try and do is be truthful to the moment, and truthful to the setting and to what's happening, as well as keeping in mind whatever your primary purpose is as a photographer in a given moment, right? And so there you're doing work for Kingdom Workers, yeah. And taking photographs to be used in that context, versus these things that are going to show up in a context like this. Anyway, I like the idea that you have in mind that larger context as well as purpose that's informing the pictures that you take and whether you decide to keep them. And yeah, there's an awful lot going on there. All right.
We've learned a lot about the how. What are we looking at? What's the what? What's the how? What's the where? How did you come to be at this place? Did you just go to a country or two and just had unlimited funds and then had all day to take pictures? What do we?
I wish the answer was yes. Okay, so Bethany student. I was a Bethany student, and God put it on my heart that I wanted to do mission work. I wanted to do photography for missions. It's like that thing. It just hits you, and you're like, okay, I want to do it, and I couldn't shake it. I called Kingdom Workers, and they had nothing, and I did that twice, and then finally, I think it was my senior year, I just on a whim, I think I was talking to a friend, and she just encouraged me, like, oh, you should just try again. Or maybe, I don't remember who it was, but I called. And I specifically remember I was in the calf, and I was like dropping my tray off, dialing Kingdom Workers and talking. And I think it was your brother, Dan. And Dan was there, and he's like, we actually just got out of a meeting talking about how we want to send a photographer to Indonesia. I called like 5 minutes after the meeting. And I said, okay, I'll go. When are we going? And then it was on me to raise funds and get over there. There's no money in it, sadly. I want to find a way to let there be money. I have ideas. I think it's incredibly valuable work done specifically for the historical aspects of it. Like, I want you guys to all, there's nothing more incredible than when I was in Indonesia. I'll never forget hearing hymns being sung in Bahasa Indonesia. That's their language. Like, it was incredible. I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. And I would love to give everyone the opportunity to be like, this is a church service in Latvia. This is a church service in Russia. This is a church service in Japan. To see it, to hear it, to experience it, because that is something that I think we need. So that's how it started. Started with that, and then the street photography thing was just something I was aware of, and I went, I should try it. I'm here, and it just was calling me, so I was just doing it on the side. Some of these pictures are taken from a car. When I was in Indonesia, I was just photographing while in a car, and it was great. Like that one of the guy at the toll booth, that's 100% reaction. We were in a car driving. I glanced over, lifted my camera, took a picture, and then we drove away. So it started in Indonesia, working for the Kingdom Workers. Street photography is something I started doing then. Fell in love with that. Life continued, and Stone Path needed to send someone to Thailand for another Christian organization, and they didn't have any students at the time. So Kurt Schrader reached out to me, and I said, heck yeah. That's part of it too, is being prepared. You'd never want to be in a place where the opportunity is given to you and you haven't done the work to be prepared. So I feel fortunate enough that I was always felt prepared. I don't know if I was confident. Those are two different things. I will say I wasn't confident, but I was prepared. I've been photographing for a long time already, probably like 5 years, 6 years. So I'd done the work, and I trusted myself enough to know that if an organization is going to spend a couple $1,000s to send me on the other side of the world, I know I can make good images for them. So it was the preparation and then seeking things out. So I went with Christians Forward, talked with the director, and then their website sucked. And I said, hey, I can do a better website for you. And she said, okay. And then we talked about bringing me on full time, and we found funding for that. I took a huge pay cut, but I went to Thailand twice with them, Myanmar once, Singapore. And that's it. That's the last time I've gone. The two images from Copenhagen and Sweden were another trip that I took with Rob Peipel through Team Stay Sports, and same thing, street photography on the side. So I guess it's just I was prepared. First I was tenacious, and I just called and called and called till I got what I wanted. And then after that, I knew I could do it, and so that I was prepared when the moment presented itself.
Sophie, and then we'll go here. Okay.
Okay, are you ready? That's about how long? Like in all reality, there's a few, right? Like there's the girls, I can remember them, the girl silhouetted, the guy standing on the corner, the woman on the corner. Other than I posed the ladies, that doesn't really count. Same thing with this woman here, she was just still. I mean, honestly, there's probably only 4 or 5 images here where I sat and waited and was ready. Everything else is literally happening in an instant in front of me. Like there's zero time. And if I hesitate, it's gone. So yeah, preparation is, like I said, it's all beforehand, right? Like you cannot do this successfully and think about your camera. You're already behind if you're thinking about what your settings are and what you're doing with this. And so that's why I use a fixed length, a single focal length, worrying about zooming. And again, I'm zooming, I'm not photographing. I have zero time to worry about that. I shoot 2 focal lengths, 35 mil and 50 mil. I see in those focal lengths. I could put a camera up to my eye right now and know how that image is going to be composed in that focal length. So it's all that work ahead of time that allows me to just walk around a city and make images. And then I cover a lot of distance. I think like on average like 10 to 15 miles a day of walking. Great. It was awesome. Yeah, I was in a flow state all day, 16 miles. I had a little Fitbit, and I went like, I remember it was like 11:30 at night, and I'm like, okay, I guess I'll go to bed. And I looked, I'm like, whoa, 15 miles. I like thought it was broken. But it was great. It was flow state all day. I had a day off, and I woke up at 6:30 in the morning and got breakfast and started out on the city, and I just walked all day. I was joking earlier, and I had to like remind myself to go to the bathroom and eat. I'm like, oh yeah, those are things you need to do, because I was just in it all day. So I felt great. It's wonderful. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you for asking that question. No, again, that goes back to like the ethics of it. I don't edit anything. I develop everything. And those are two words that I try and use very specifically. Edit, I put in the category of removing or adding something from or to the scene. Develop is the same thing that's been going on for photography since its inception. Is you have, whether it's a glass plate or it's a piece of paper, or it's a digital sensor, it comes in, and then whether you're putting it in a larger or looking at it on a screen, you have to make decisions on how dark are the darks, how light are the lights. But what I don't actually like is the time it takes for me to figure out color. I love I've shot film a little bit, but if I could, I would just shoot Kodachrome all day, because I love the way Kodachrome images look, and then you don't have to worry about color. It's been chosen for you. So I spend too much time tweaking the colors and getting it just right, especially so it all feels cohesive. But every single one of these images has anywhere from like 2 to 8 different passes or strokes or something going on in it to bring out a face or darken a shadow or bring up some color somewhere. So there's a lot put into it, but hopefully you never ever notice that. There and then. My photography has made my video work way stronger, I would say. Just compositionally, again, to be able to just glance down at a frame and understand instinctively if it's good or bad real quick, and then know how to fix that really, really quick. Story is wildly important to me. Even if, some of these images, I hope that there's implied story, or that you can imagine a story, or there's a world beyond the frame. And a lot of that is the fact that most of these people are in flux. They're moving, they're going somewhere, they're coming from somewhere. I think story is inherent in just how I think and what I do. And that goes back to being a little kid and watching incredible movies with my grandpa. That's how I grew up with like what kid grows up with Casablanca, but I did. And it's one of the best. And so it's just ingrained in me that story matters. And that's what makes life beautiful too, is you look at your life and you're like, oh, that's the way this played out. It's actually kind of like poetic and beautiful, and how everything wove together in that moment. And so, yeah, I kind of think that answered your question. Denise, do you have one? Mm-hmm. There's a list. Top of the list, Cartier-Bresson. I quoted him twice in my little artist statement, but he's the one that introduced the French street photographer, documentary photographer. He's what got me on that path of street photography and going, oh, this is a thing. I had such a hard time writing. So thank you to Angie, by the way. She was like my sage. I was writing and hating everything I was doing, and she was just building me full of confidence, so thank you. But there's almost no point in me writing about how I feel. Sometimes I feel like because Bresson just explains it pretty clearly, and it's that he viewed himself as a surrealist, so he would go out and photograph, and it was all about geometry and composition. So he was an early influence, but I love color, and he had questions about its validity. Ernst Haas is another great street photographer, like one of the early godfathers of color street photography. Saul Leiter is another one. Modern photographers would be like Craig Whitehead and Joshua K. Jackson. They shoot very, very, very different than I do, but I love their work. And then it's all color. They do exclusively color, and I just love it.
How much does being in what we would consider an exotic location affect your work? I mean, are there Burmese photographers who would love to come and shoot? It's weird to think that. Could you do the same show walking around, say, downtown Mankato?
I've tried. It's a waste of my time in a nice way. It really is, though. Like it's like, you know, it's like I can't think of the term. I put in time and I don't get a lot out. I've done it. I've spent 3, 4, 5 hours walking around Mankato, and I get an image I don't hate. Not something I love, something I don't hate. And one, there's just not enough people. There's not enough variety. There's not enough color. I really have tried, and people have challenged me and be like, well, you could. I'm like, yeah, if I didn't have a life or time or what. The thing that made this so accessible is I was away from my family who I miss dearly, but my missing them or my thinking about them wouldn't change my situation. So I could give 12 hours a day to photography, and it was great. And then every corner, the reason it's called One More Block is I came up with that mantra. I would be photographing and I would start getting tired. But as soon as I thought to myself, like, oh, I should stop, my rule I set for myself is I have to go one more block. Because almost every single time if I went one more block, I would find something and be like, ooh, and then I'd photograph, and then that would lead to something else, and all of a sudden an hour has gone by, and I've made my favorite images of the day. Almost every single time that would happen, where I wanted to quit, went one more block, and it's like this beautiful, I think of like Alice chasing the bunny. You're just following and you're following and you're following, and you end up in this adventurous place. So I have tried a Mankato, and it's just doesn't work for me. I wish it did, but it doesn't. Doesn't mean it won't for you, but it doesn't for me. Yeah, so I actually, funny side note is I love studio photography. I love the two opposite ends of the spectrum. Full control, where I'm gonna like photograph Lars and say, no, hand down a little bit, fix your shoe. And I'm gonna sit here and I'm gonna like perfectly align the light so that the way the light hits Lars's jaw is just right. And but for real, like those are the things you think about. Everyone's facial structure is different. If you light the same person as the last person, you're not doing it right. And you're not doing that person justice. So I treat it really seriously, but it's weird because it's the polar opposite. I love full control and I love no control. So I think that's what it becomes. It becomes, and again, when that person is sitting in front of me, I don't see that person. I see the light on their cheek. I see the light on their nose. I see the light in their eye. I see the way their hair is falling. So I see them, but on this like really deep physical level, but it's different. It's strange. Yeah, does that answer that a little bit? Okay.
So you said earlier that you're not a huge fan of taking pictures of Mankato, and I think I remember in high school you told me you got really sick of taking golden hour pictures,
Mm-hmm.
right? Is there a specific setting or environment that you absolutely love? You could just churn out photos in?
Southeast Asia. I mean, it's people and its environment. So a place that's a rich environment and full of people, I would say. And it could be anywhere. As long as you have those two things, I can photograph, I think, pretty happily. And I've learned to love hard light. Like if you look, there's almost no golden hour. I mean, maybe I shouldn't say that because I don't really know. I'd have to look. But I love hard light. And that's one of those things like you have to grow and mature because you think golden hour, oh, you got to shoot during golden hour. No, you don't. Like that gives you really boring shadows sometimes, and like you don't have as much to play with. So, yeah, I would say lots of people in a rich environment. One more. Who's got one? I'd say no. I have the luxury of being a male, and the reality of the world is that it's incredibly different to be a female in a lot of these places, and that's just how it is. So no, I always felt really safe. I mean, I would say I'm not book smart. I'm street smart, way more so. So I can read a situation. I can read a situation from 4 or 5 blocks away. So I would know where not to go. I definitely found myself in some interesting scenarios. I'm like, oh, wow, okay. I'm just going to slowly, camera's going to stay down, and I'm just going to walk. So I've been there, but yeah, I always felt safe. And language-wise, I mean, we're just incredibly spoiled as Americans because all of these countries, if you're, eating out somewhere, they'll speak enough English. But I always try and learn how to say please and thank you, may I photograph? And then I learned how to tell people their food is delicious, and you wouldn't believe the amount of smiles I would get. Oroi ma is Thai for like very delicious, so that was like my favorite thing. But yeah, that's about it. Oh, real quick, thank you. I got to do my thank yous, otherwise it's gonna. Thank you to my wife. This is like 2+ months of me being away from home, so she's incredibly patient. Taking care of children while I was out gallivanting the world and making art. So thank you to Angie, thank you to Lars for doing this tonight. Jason, I'm finally gonna be out of your hair. Well, maybe when it comes down, but Jason has been incredibly patient with me putting this up. Ingrid for helping me arrange everything. Sports Picks for saving me in the last moment with like mounting all my work. And then John over at the MLC print shop worked with me to make sure that I got the exact prints that I wanted. So this is a huge, even though it's my work, it's a giant collaboration. Okay, I'm done now.
Really, both of you, that was delightful. Thank you so much. Thank you for, well, I could go on and on. I won't. We have refreshments set up for you over here, and remember to check the library and definitely spend some time with the work. Thank you very much. Enjoy the music.